Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you've ever wondered why certain world powers just seem completely locked in endless, unyielding conflict, you are in the exact right place. We're going to look way past today's headlines to uncover the epic 2,500-year history behind literally one of the longest-running clashes of civilizations in human history. We're breaking down this massive historical timeline to see exactly why the West and Iran were, well, seemingly destined to fight.
So let's dive right in by challenging what I call the modern illusion. When you open up the news today, it's so easy to assume the hostility between Washington and Tehran is just about recent politics. We hear about the 1979 Islamic Revolution, nuclear ambitions, oil reserves, but honestly, that's just the modern view. The ancient reality is that today's diplomacy is merely the latest chapter in a much, much older narrative. To truly grasp why these two powers are caught in this cycle, we have to look way past the 21st century and examine a rivalry that started 25 centuries ago.
Because we're covering a truly massive scale of history here is our roadmap for this explainer. First, the modern illusion. Second, Greece and the Persian Empire. Third, Alexander, great or accursed. Fourth, Rome versus Persia. And finally, America and Iran today.
Okay, starting with part 1, the modern illusion, a lineage of empires.
The absolutely crucial point to understand here is that this isn't just some 21st century political spat. It is a profound, deeply ancient rivalry. The United States very much considers itself the philosophical, cultural, and political heir to Western civilization, a lineage rooted directly in ancient Greece in the Roman Republic. Iran, on the flip side, proudly claims the legacy of the Persian Empire, which was one of the greatest and oldest superpowers in all of human history. Meaning the conflict we're watching today, it's actually the continuation of the world's longest-running feud, East versus West.
Let's move to part 2, Greece and the Persian Empire, the spark of conflict.
This timeline really puts things into perspective. It brilliantly illustrates the sheer epic scale of what we're unpacking. The story kicks off all the way back in the 6th century BCE with the rise of the Achaemenid Empire under Cyrus the Great. Persia was expanding incredibly fast, swallowing up Babylon, Egypt, Asia Minor, effectively creating the largest empire the world had ever seen at that time. And when that rapidly expanding Persian superpower pushed toward the Aegean coast, well, it ran right into the Greek city-states. What's totally fascinating here is the sheer mutual misunderstanding between these two distinct worlds. To the Persians, looking out westward, the Greeks were just these disorganized, chaotic tribals living on the absolute fringe of the civilized world. But flip that perspective around. To the Greeks, looking eastward, Persia was this despotic leviathan directly threatening their freedom and their entire way of life. It's just a total, fundamental clash of worldviews.
And this intense friction inevitably culminated in the famous Greco-Persian Wars of the 5th century BCE. We are talking about legendary epic battles like Marathon, Thermopylae, immortalized by the 300 Spartans, and Salamis. But what's crucial for our story is how these battles were remembered. Greek historians, like Herodotus, frame these not just as military skirmishes, but as a fight for survival between Western freedom and Eastern tyranny. These battles literally birthed the core geopolitical doctrine of the West, that deeply ingrained belief that the Middle East represents an autocratic force that must be contained. Meanwhile, Persia, they just saw Greece as a rebellious frontier, refusing to respect global order.
Moving on to part 3, Alexander, great or cursed.
So, for over a century after those wars, Persia remained the dominant global superpower. But that balance completely shattered with the rise of Alexander of Macedon in 334 BCE. Now, in the West, we all know him as Alexander the Great, right? The legendary conqueror who spread civilization. But in Iranian history, he is remembered entirely differently. Over there, he is Alexander the Accursed. They remember him as a destructive barbarian who didn't just defeat their armies, but marched right into their ceremonial capital of Persepolis and burned it to the ground. Destroying thousands of years of art, architecture, and historical records in a single night, that wasn't just a military victory. That was complete cultural devastation. This was the very first deep historical wound inflicted by the West upon Iran, and it cemented this devastating psychological narrative in the Persian mind, the belief that Western powers will stop at absolutely nothing to dismantle Iranian sovereignty. And honestly, that is a narrative that still strongly echoes today.
Let's look at part 4, Rome versus Persia, the longest war. 700. I really want you to let that staggering number sink in for a second. This represents the number of years of continuous, brutal, attrition warfare between the Roman Empire and the resurrected Persian dynasties, first the Parthians, then the Sassanids. From 92 BCE to 628 CE, they fought continuously. To this day, it is the longest military conflict in recorded human history. If the Greeks and Persians fought over ideals, Rome and Persia fought an absolute, grueling war of survival.
Just picture this epic historical scale for a moment. Imagine these incredibly detailed, dramatic scenes of ancient Roman legionnaires with their superior infantry tactics and engineering, facing off against elite Persian cataphracts, which were basically heavily armored cavalry, in a dusty, atmospheric desert battlefield. On one side, Rome has seemingly endless economic resources. On the other, Persia has lightning-fast horse archers and the deep, strategic defense of the Iranian plateau. Because their military styles were so perfectly opposed, neither side could ever permanently conquer the other. Total gridlock.
Decade after decade, Roman legions marched east to capture the Persian capital of Ctesiphon, and Persian armies marched west toward the Mediterranean. Entire generations lived and died knowing absolutely nothing but perpetual war. The immense financial and military strain of this endless 700-year meat grinder eventually left both of these massive civilizations totally exhausted, making them highly vulnerable to the Arab conquests of the 7th century.
Which brings us to Part 5, America and Iran Today, the Ghost of Rome.
Let's see how this historical blueprint actually translates to our modern era. When the United States was formed, it was intentionally built on the blueprint of classical Rome and ancient Greece. I mean, you can literally see it in the neoclassical architecture in Washington, D.C. Just look at the Capitol or the Senate. America inherited Western political systems, foreign policy doctrines, and cultural ideals. So when the U.S. became a global superpower in the 20th century, it naturally stepped right into the historical shoes previously occupied by Rome, securing global trade routes, building a massive global military network, asserting Western dominance in the Middle East. Geopolitically speaking, America is the ghost of Rome.
And on the other side of the globe, well, despite thousands of years of language shifts and massive political transformations, Iran actually retained its core Persian identity. They kept their deep cultural pride in that exact same geographic fortress atop the Iranian plateau. So when Tehran opposes American influence in the Middle East today, they aren't just reacting to modern policy. They are looking through the exact same civilizational lens that has actively resisted Western hegemony from Greece and Rome for 2.5 millennia.
The current geopolitical standoff we see on the news, it's not some anomaly of modern history. Sure, the tools of war have definitely changed. Unmanned drones have replaced the Roman gladius and the Persian horse archers. The political ideologies have evolved and swapped names. But the underlying dynamic between these two distinct civilizations, it remains exactly the same. It is a continuous story of two centers of power, each completely believing it represents the true order of the world, locked in an enduring struggle. Understanding this 2,500-year cycle completely changes how we view today's news, doesn't it? It leaves us with a really critical, provocative question for the future of global geopolitics. Are the West and Iran permanently destined to just repeat the battles of their ancestors? Or can this ancient blood feud ever truly end? Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this incredible history. Keep questioning what you see in the headlines, and I'll see you in the next explainer.